Most children her age spent their afternoons practicing handwriting or chasing clouds across playgrounds. But Hana Mori, barely 8 years old, sat quietly on the polished bench of a corporate lobby, sketching motherboard circuits into a frayed notebook like she was decoding a secret meant only for her. No one noticed her. No one ever did. The revolving doors of Gravion Systems hissed open and close, ushering in executives in pressed suits, engineers with tangled headphone cords, and interns gripping coffee cups like lifelines. They walked past Hana without a glance, absorbed in schedules and swipe cards and whispered urgency. But Hana didn't mind. She had learned that invisibility, when wielded with precision, could become a kind of power. She trailed 6 measured steps behind her mother each morning, not because anyone told her to, but because she liked it that way. It gave her time to observe. Her mother, Aiko, moved like water through the corridors, careful, deliberate, always a step outside the world that gleamed around her. As a janitor, she carried no badge of prestige, no voice in any room that mattered. But to Hannah, her mother's silence was a kind of armor, an elegance that neither bowed nor begged. Every day they entered through the service door. The security guard never asked Hana's name, never even blinked. Aiko would murmur a number, 43 or 29 or 12, and disappear into the service elevator, mop cart in hand. And Hana would take her place in the corner bench beside the chrome staircase, leg barely reaching the ground, her world folding open in the pages of a notebook far more important to her than any textbook. Today, she was building something new, a device that spoke to damaged signals, a receiver that didn't need wires. She'd seen something like it once on a video buried inside a forum she wasn't supposed to be browsing, and while the image had long faded, the idea had refused to leave. She was drawing a schematic now, lines curling like veins across paper, logic etched between pencil smudges and quiet breath. It wasn't just fantasy. It was practice. She was training herself to think like the machines she could never afford, to speak in the language of circuitry, voltage, and elegant failure. Around her, the building hummed, elevator chimes, murmurs of start-of-day meetings, the click of tablets opening, shutting, reopening. Hana didn't look up. Noise didn't distract her. If anything, it sharpened her focus. She liked the chaos. It made her clarity feel rare, earned. In her lap, she held not just the notebook, but also a broken digital watch and a cracked USB drive that no longer worked but refused to be discarded. They were relics of her experiments, fragments of a silent education built on scavenged parts and stubborn curiosity. Each component held a lesson, each failure, a doorway. No one had taught her any of it, but no one had told her not to learn either. That morning, as the sunlight filtered down through the glass atrium, Hana flipped a page and began sketching imaginary code, a language of numbers and letters that only she could understand. She imagined it powering her device, smoothing fractured signals into perfect clarity. She imagined it working. She imagined it being real. And then, without warning, the lights above her flickered. She paused, pencil midair. A second later, every screen in the open concept lobby dimmed, then blackened entirely, one by one, like eyes closing. The building sighed, then stilled, and in that breathless pause, the quiet began to fracture. Voices rising, phones were pulled out. A surge of tension washed through the room like static in the air before a storm. One word drifted through the noise. Breach. Hana didn't move. She knew better than to stand out. The moment you were seen, people remembered to tell you to leave, to wait outside, to return when you had a name, a badge, a degree. So she sat, still, silent, listening. But even as the chaos swelled around her, her pencil resumed its path, just slightly, almost imperceptibly. Because in the swirl of panic and power suits, Hana felt something shift inside her. Not fear, recognition. Something in the way they moved, the things they shouted, the terms they used. It was familiar. Something was breaking. And somehow, she already knew how to follow the cracks. The voices around her turned sharp, urgent. Footsteps began to echo louder against the marble floors of Gravion's pristine lobby. Screens flashed red. Phones lit up. Executives who never made eye contact with janitors were now shouting across the room like passengers on a sinking ship. One man with a tablet clutched tight in his hand barked into an earpiece. "We're locked out. Not just the front end, the whole system's down. Remote commands are not responding." Across the room, a woman in a graphite suit rushed past, her heels tapping like warning signals. "DNS pings are failing. Backup protocols aren't initiating. Where's the CTA?" Well, panic thickened the air like dust after a collapse. Hana remained still. Her pencil rested lightly across her notebook, her legs no longer swinging. She wasn't scared, not in the way they were. What she felt was different, a deep, electric stillness, the kind that came just before an answer revealed itself. She watched them, the executives, the IT staff, the analysts with degrees and salaries, and badges that opened every door. And she realized slowly, terribly, they didn't know what to do. One of the younger engineers muttered something about a possible malware vector. Another mentioned kernel overrides. They were throwing jargon like lifelines, hoping one would latch onto the problem and pull them out. But Hana could see it clearly in their eyes, confusion wrapped in authority. They were trying everything they'd been taught, and everything was failing. She turned to a fresh page in her notebook. On top, she wrote a simple question. Where did the breach begin? Then, line by line, she began sketching her process. She had no terminal, no clearance, but she had something else. A mind that had never been trained to think inside systems. A mind that mapped logic like landscapes, read error trails like rivers, and understood loops the way a musician understands notes. Step 1, isolate origin. Step 2, check for internal anomalies. Step 3, manual shell test. No scripts. Step 4, read the failure like a story, not a system. She didn't need all the information. She needed the rhythm. And something in the noise around her, the terminology, the panic, the repetition of failed attempts, gave her a hunch. This wasn't an attack that wanted to break everything. It wanted to freeze it, like a lock, not a bomb. That changed everything. Her pencil moved faster now. Symbols, commands, and function maps form on paper like whispered instructions. Somewhere above her, alarms began to hum. Not screaming klaxons, just soft, clinical tones. Internal alerts, system-wide but not destructive. Hana knew what that meant. The structure was still intact. The damage wasn't physical, it was strategic. And if the skeleton of the system still existed, then someone could get in. Someone who knew where to look. Across the lobby, a cluster of men argued near a frosted glass stairwell. "This can't be internal," one said, slamming a fist against a tabletop. "We triple firewalled this entry point after Zurich." "It's ghost code," another woman snapped. "It's mimicking user behavior. Too clean for brute force." Hana heard the words like cues in a song. Ghost code, recursive mimicry, user-level disguise. Her eyes widened. She'd seen simulations like that, late at night, on a borrowed tablet in a cafe across from her cousin's apartment. She remembered bootleg programs, cracked games with hidden functions, modding tools she never truly understood but instinctively felt. This wasn't a brute force hack. It was a shadow, something built to mirror normalcy. And wait, she turned the page again, faster this time, hands trembling slightly from the weight of clarity. This breach didn't scream, it whispered. She barely noticed her fingers tightening around the pencil, And then, in a moment, she would replay again and again. She did something that broke every rule she had lived by in that building. She spoke, not loudly, not even with full confidence. Just enough. Have you checked the socket overflow loop? The words drifted like a breeze across a bones, then heads turned. Too fast, too sharp. One man narrowed his eyes. What did she say? Another scoffed. Jesus, who let someone's kid wander in? Heat rushed to Hana's cheeks. She instinctively clutched her notebook to her chest as if to make herself smaller, invisible again. Don't speak. Don't be seen. She took a step back. But someone had noticed her for the right reason. A tall intern, standing just beyond the main group, tilted his head. He wore no authority, just a lanyard and a thoughtful stare. Jonah Reed. He didn't laugh. He didn't dismiss. He listened. And then he said quietly but clearly, "That makes sense." Oh, yeah. The room turned again, this time not toward Hannah, but toward Jonah. If the attacker was masking behavior, he continued, a recursive socket loop could trigger a user-level lockout while hiding in plain view. It fits the pattern. Silence. Then the movement. Someone scribbled. Someone else muttered. Another opened a laptop. And just like that, the conversation shifted. Not because Hana had solved it, but because she had cracked the silence. For the first time, they looked, not at her, but because of her. And even though she shrank back into the hallway, behind a column no one used, her voice had already entered the machine. She didn't belong there, not according to any handbook, not according to the security protocols now blinking red across Gravion's control panels, and certainly not according to the two uniformed guards who had just been ordered to escort her out. But no one moved, not yet. Because Jonah Reed, the intern with the quiet voice and steadier conviction, had just planted himself in front of her, like a firewall written in human code. She's the only one making progress, he said. His voice was calm, but beneath it was tension, visible in the way his shoulders squared slightly forward, as if bracing for impact, for laughter, for dismissal. Instead, there was silence. Even the guards hesitated. From behind the glass of the conference room, Ethan Granger, CEO of Gravion Systems, watched with arms folded, his face unreadable. A man who'd negotiated billion-dollar contracts and silenced federal inquiries with nothing but a measured phrase, now stood frozen, trying to process what he was seeing. A child, in a hoodie too large for her frame, holding a notebook like a sword, standing where grown men had failed. He turned to the lead engineer. "This is a multi-million-dollar infrastructure," he said quietly. "We cannot have a child with no clearance near our internal system." But even as the words left his mouth, something inside him didn't believe them anymore. Because Hana hadn't flinched. Not when they scoffed, not when the alarms pulsed overhead, not even when someone muttered, "Let's see if the janitor's kid can do what our entire division couldn't." They gave her a terminal. Not because they trusted her, but because they had nothing left. Jonah found a chair, slid it towards her, and whispered, "You'll need to stand on it. The desk's too high." She nodded once, tucked her notebook under her arm, and climbed up like someone preparing to operate not a keyboard, but a scalpel. The terminal screen was already a battlefield. Admin shells open, diagnostic tools frozen, error prompts blinking like dying stars. 3 teams had tried and failed to breach the encryption layers. None had succeeded. Hana didn't touch the keys right away. She stood still for 10 full seconds, scanning, absorbing, aligning the system layout to the map she had already drawn in her head. Then she began. No hesitation, no guesswork, only movement. Her fingers moved with quiet assurance, not like a child learning, but like someone remembering, retracing a path carved in muscle memory. One command, then another, then a shift in the code structure that made 2 engineers gasp aloud. Did she just override the diagnostic shell? Jonah leaned in. His eyes were wide. She didn't override it. She bypassed it. One of the engineers whispered, "That's not even in the manual." Hana didn't hear them. She was deep inside now. Not just the system, but beneath it. She passed through authentication gates designed to repel brute force. She slipped past false flags and honeypot traps, not because she knew their names, but because she felt where they didn't belong. This wasn't just technical work. It was intuition refined by obsession. A file appeared, fragmented, seemingly corrupted. Hana squinted. No, disguised. A recursive loop, hollow in the center, pretending to be part of the firewall's architecture. She traced it, pulled one thread, then another, and there it was. A single line of malformed syntax. Subtle, elegant, familiar. Too familiar. Her pulse quickened. She had seen this before, not this exact code, but the logic, the shape of it, the way it misled, the way it spoke. She had first seen it years ago on a forgotten thread in an abandoned forum, a post titled Digital Phantoms, Symmetric Disruption Methods. There were no comments. Only one line of text. It's not about breaking in, it's about becoming the door. That line had haunted her. She had copied the code fragment by hand into her notebook and spent weeks trying to make sense of it on a salvaged computer with a cracked screen and two working keys. Now, years later, that logic had returned, evolved, weaponized, breathing inside Gravion's system like a ghost. Her fingers stopped. She wasn't looking at a virus. She was looking at a signature. Someone like her had written this. Someone self-taught, unseen, unwelcome. But instead of building, they had chosen to burn. She sat back slightly. Her breath was hollow. For the first time since she stepped into the cast, Hana was no longer certain what she felt. Not fear, not awe, something closer to recognition. A hacker who moved like she did, who learned as she had, but who had made a different choice. And now, here she was, chasing their trail through layers of code like breadcrumbs in the dark. She had entered to fix a system, but now she was walking toward a confrontation with someone who might once have been her reflection, twisted by time, anger, or abandonment. She stared into the screen and whispered barely loud enough for Jonah to hear, "I think I know who built this." He blinked. "You mean a group?" Hana shook her head. "No, I mean someone like me." Hana had always loved problems, not the kind of adults liked, math sheets or puzzles with answers printed on the back. She loved problems that moved, problems that didn't want to be solved. She loved chaos. But this was something else. The deeper she went into the code, the more personal it felt. There were breadcrumbs, but not the kind engineers left behind. These were intentional. Subtle traps disguised as symmetry. Logic branches that led nowhere, unless you turned sideways, unless you already knew that dead ends could be doorways. Each step forward made her feel as if she were reading a story written in her handwriting, from a future version of herself she didn't recognize. She could feel Jonah's presence nearby, still, silent, protective, but she didn't look at him. She couldn't. Not yet. Because something inside her had begun to fracture. She had always believed her mind was a gift, a secret compass pointing toward broken things that begged to be understood. But now, staring into code so familiar it echoed like an old lullaby, she wasn't sure anymore. If someone like me had written this, then what am I capable of? She traced another line of logic. This one spiraled inward, recursive and elegant, folding data around itself like a snake devouring its tail. No panic, no recklessness. This wasn't the work of someone lashing out. This was deliberate, cold, patient, and that terrified her more than any error log or firewall breach ever could. This person hadn't just wanted to break the system, They wanted to leave a signature inside it, a mirror, for someone who could read it, someone like her. She hesitated. Her fingers stopped above the keys, and for the first time since stepping up to the terminal, she whispered to herself, "What if I'm just one choice away from becoming them?" Behind her, the room shifted. Engineers murmured. Someone ran data logs again. The system's pulse, once flatlined, now flickered with faint signs of response. But none of that reached her. She was too deep now, not just into the system, but into the space inside her where fear and recognition had started to merge. The attacker hadn't crashed the system. They had encased it, froze it, wrapped it in a puzzle only certain minds would even see, let alone understand. And Hana had seen it all. That was the real horror. Not that she understood it, but she understood it too well. What if the line between saving something and breaking it is so thin, you only know you've crossed it when it's too late? She thought of her mother still upstairs on the 39th floor, wiping windows no one ever looked through. She thought of the cracked USB drives under her bed. The scavenged circuit boards were stacked behind the heater. The night she stayed awake until 4 a.m., just to see if she could rewrite the boot sequence on a toy robot without breaking it. And she thought of this attacker, who had taken all of that same instinct and turned it toward destruction. Her hands trembled now, just slightly. Jonah must have sensed it because he finally stepped closer. He didn't interrupt. He didn't ask what she was doing. He just stood there, a quiet presence between her and the fear pressing in like static. After a long moment, his voice found her. "Hana," he said gently, "what do you see?" She didn't look up. Her voice came low, like a secret. "This isn't just sabotage. It's a conversation." They weren't trying to destroy the system. They were trying to talk to someone who could follow them here. Jonah didn't reply. He didn't need to, because the unspoken truth between them now hung like gravity. This attack was a message, and Hana was its recipient. She took a long breath, not steady, but strong. Then she whispered, "If someone like that exists, I have to finish this. I need to see where it ends." And she did, line by line, loop by loop. She moved deeper into the breach, not as an intruder, but as someone answering a call. And finally, after 90 minutes that felt like a lifetime, something shifted. A screen across the room blinked, then another, and then a slow wave of green light began to ripple across the central dashboard, like color returning to the veins of a dead tree. The system wasn't just responding. It was coming back to life. Gasps, shouts, disbelief. Someone dropped a stylus. Another cursed aloud in pure awe. But Hana didn't move. She was still inside the machine, her hands on the keys, her eyes trained on the final gate of logic that had held them hostage. And as the last loop unraveled beneath her fingers, she whispered something no one else heard. "I see you." Because at the heart of the system, she hadn't found a virus. She had found a voice. And now she had answered. The silence that followed was not empty. It was thick with the weight of realization. Hana stepped back from the terminal. The system, once locked, once untouchable, was breathing again. Slowly, fully. And she had done it. She didn't ask for applause. She didn't look around the room to measure her impact. She just reached for her notebook, hugged it to her chest, and let her breath settle. Across the glass, Ethan Granger stood unmoving. His face was pale, not with fear, but with something quieter. Recognition, shame, memory. He didn't look at the engineers who now whispered her name, didn't glance at the blinking dashboards. His eyes were on her, not the child, not the janitor's daughter, but the mind, the mirror, he almost discarded. Hours later, long after the team had confirmed full restoration, after systems hummed and dashboards glowed steady green, Ethan sat alone in his office. the lights dim, the city sprawling beneath him. He watched security footage again and again of Hana at the terminal. Her stillness, her focus, her defiance without words. And for the first time in years, he remembered something he thought he had lost: belief in what can't be measured. The next morning, he rewrote Gravion's policies: internship criteria, age limits, GPA thresholds. Gone. In their place, a single line: "We will no longer confuse credentials with potential." And then he called her mother. Personally, he didn't send an assistant. He didn't wait for a press release. He simply asked, "Can Hana come back today?" Not as a visitor, as part of the team. They met in the boardroom. No fanfare, no cameras, just a quiet space where real things happen. Ethan sat across from her, paper badge in hand. It read, Hana M. Systems Research Access. Full clearance. "We'd like to give you a space of your own," he said. "Resources, mentors, tools, time and freedom to break things." Hannah blinked, then tilted her head. "Will I still be allowed to fix them too?" He smiled, a real one. "That's what this place needs most." She took the badge, slipped it into her pocket like it was just another resistor in her collection. No ceremony, no posing, but her mother cried, not because of the badge, because for the first time, someone powerful had seen her daughter and didn't look away. Weeks passed. Hana's name was now on the lab door. Her diagrams were pinned on whiteboards. Her circuits flowed not just through machines, but through the minds of engineers who no longer underestimated her. She never asked for attention. She asked for better problems, and Gravion gave them. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, she left a folded note on Ethan's desk. It read, "Thank you for seeing me." Seeing Madame, he read it. And for the first time in a decade, a man made of numbers and strategy felt human again. Message of the story: true brilliance doesn't ask for permission. It just needs to be seen. Even the quietest voice can rewrite the system if someone chooses to listen.